How will we know when we're on?
Yeah, I'll tell you just now.
Oh, okay.
We are on.
Oh. Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, who have joined us on this Dr. Fundi channel via multiple social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and also the Dr. Fundi website. My name is Dr. Fundile Nyati. I'm the host of this channel. And today I have a special guest, Dr. Rose Richard. As you will know that during the month of August in South Africa, it's a month that is dedicated to celebrating women. And so we on this channel have been, featuring a number of phenomenal women who have done great things, are continuing to do great things for our country, and also doing great things beyond our country. And so we felt that today we must host Dr. Rose Richard. She is the head of the research portfolio and the writing lab at the Language Center at the University of Stellenbosch. She is not a medical doctor. She is the real doctor with a PhD, a doctor of philosophy in psychology. All right. And she obtained this in 2012. Now, she is a phenomenal South African woman, top academic, who also will share with us a journey of living with a chronic illness that led her to actually getting a transplant. So she will also share, because she's very passionate about sharing about that journey. So we will look at her as an academic, her journey, her inspirational journey, going up to the levels where she's at. But she will also be sharing with us, some of the challenges of ill health that led to her getting a kidney transplant. She's fluent in at least 7 languages.
I'm not fluent, not fluent.
Okay, all right.
Not fluent. I'm fluent in one language.
All right, but anyway, English, Afrikaans, French, Italian, and Latin. All right, obviously with Italian and Latin, it's elementary type of of training. Classical Greek, which is also elementary university course, and Zulu, also elementary primary school communication. So she won't be lost when you speak those languages, but obviously
I'll be lost. I'll need a translator.
English and Afrikaans, I think that's where she's very, very comfortable. So so she's basically, she loves languages. Now, in terms of main areas of professional expertise, academic literacies, autoethnography, chronicity, educational biography, illness narrative, medical humanities, quality health research. Those are just some of the main areas of professional expertise. She got her BA from Wits University in 1990. She got her honors in BA in 1992, where she was looking at English literature in the 19th and 20th century British and American literature. She went on to obtain a Master of Arts in 1995, again, full thesis in English literature, and later on in 2012, she then obtained her Doctor of Philosophy from University of Stellenbosch. And that's one that interests me because the title of, would I call it a thesis? your PhD, yeah, was you look very well for a transplant, an autoethnographic narrative and identification in organ failure, transplantation, and recovery. And I think it brings closer her experiences around somebody who had some ill health, kidneys failing, getting a transplant, and recovering, after the transplant. So we'll hear all about that. And I'm just about to finish. I always want to give a proper profile to my guests. So in terms of professional career, like I said, I mean, if we just look at Mattis, that is University of Stellenbosch, she's been a tutor for first years in the English department from 2000 to 2001. She's been a head writing laboratory language center, again at Stellenbosch, including responsibilities, for the language center research portfolios. She's been also, an independent researcher in medical humanities, not a formal post, but something that she did as she was preparing, to do her PhD. She's had numerous awards, grants, and distinctions, numerous publications, academic publications on academic writing, but also in creative and other forms of writing in the public domain. She's presented in many conferences, but also non-conference, presentations. She's appeared in many public media, interviews. She's got editorial responsibilities for a number of journals, reviewing journals, supervising thesis, examining thesis, and she's doing community work and teaches a lot of people at different levels, from students up to, PhD students. And I'm sure with postdoc, you also get involved, but you'll tell me if I'm wrong. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Rose Richard. Welcome.
I feel nervous suddenly.
No, you must not be nervous. It's always important when we say somebody is a phenomenal woman, who has done great things. I know people who have a lot of humility. They don't really feel good when we mention all their achievements, but it's important that we remind them of what they have achieved in their lives, and also what they are continuing to add value on. So for you, you have love for languages, and I want to know where that love comes from. But to kickstart our conversation, Dr. Richards, let me just call you Rose, if you don't mind.
Can I call you Fundi?
Yes, you can just call me Fundi. Fundi, that's easy that way. This doctor thing, sometimes it creates barriers and puts a lot of pressure. But if we just say Rose and Fundi, then that's good. So just to kickstart the discussion, who is Rose? Where was she born? What kind of family did she come from? And what were the early influences that have shaped you as a person? Even now, when you look back, you say, oh, this one, definitely it's those teachings from early childhood.
Well, it's actually a very interesting question. At first, I would have probably answered it in a more sort of categorical way, like saying, I was born here, I lived there, whatever, which I can do. But I know that you did send me a couple of the questions beforehand, and I did have a chance to think about them a little. And when I was thinking about them, it kind of changed my perception. I think it showed me something about myself or my family situation as well. So briefly, I was born in Johannesburg. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay. I was born in Johannesburg, and I grew up there. I went to school there, and I lived all my life there until my mid-20s when I moved to the Cape. But my family, I have a younger brother. He's about 2 years younger than me. My parents divorced when I was 11. My father remarried and had two other sons who are much younger than me, and I don't actually have contact with his side of the family, so I don't really know them. I grew up with my mother and my brother, and I would say I was partly brought up by my grandparents, and that were my mother's parents, and that was interesting because I had three parents really rather than two. And my grandparents had obviously brought my mother up, but then they also kind of brought me up as well. So I had the same educational type of background that my mum and her brothers had, and I also had the well, they were very religious, so I had the same type of religious background, although I'm not religious myself. But what was interesting for me was the education side of it. There's a lot of teachers in my family. Something I have noticed before, but it also, not only do people tend to go into some form of teaching, but I think people would also have rather clear ideas on how to teach people things and what should be important. So this is what I noticed when I was thinking about this a little bit earlier on. My grandparents, and I'm not quite sure why, they had this idea that you should only teach people things when they were ready to learn. Okay, that's the first thing, and what they wanted to learn. So, and that approach can have varying results because you might not want to learn things that are quite important. So, or you might finally want to learn something when you should have learned it a while back. But anyway, so I was brought up in that type of setting. It was almost like a type of follow your bliss type approach to education. Like if the child wants to learn something about science, give them science books, or not a case of saying, look, your brother's going into science, you need to do something else, or that might be present somewhere else. So it was quite strange, because what I noticed was this: not only did that determine what I learned growing up, although I went to a formal school, but I would always argue that most of my education happened outside school in some way, because there were things I followed because I was interested in them. I learned to read before going to school because I wanted to. So then my grandmother, who was a teacher, and my mom made sure I got all the best little reading books for children, and then they taught me how to read. And that really was what allowed me to do everything else afterwards, because I could always rely on myself to go and read something or teach myself about something, even before the internet. I often think it would have been nice to have had the internet when we were growing up, but we didn't really have it.
Very, very easy.
It would have been
going through library and checking books there and all of that.
You could have found anything you wanted, but we couldn't really do it then. But I did the best I could. So, but what was interesting for me was also, I now realize I've used the same approach with my students. And luckily I can, because of what I teach. But I mean, it's pretty much a case of letting people discover things and letting people work at their own pace and so on, and not forcing people to learn things they don't want to learn and that sort of thing, which again may have varying results, but So I think it definitely, that part of my upbringing, I think, influenced me more than I realized, and I actually only realized it this afternoon.
This afternoon.
And I suddenly thought, where did that come from?
Yes. And those days before internet, you'd find that in most families, especially where they were teachers, parents were teachers, there would be these encyclopedia books, where you're supposed to then get information, and there'll also be Reader's Digest and all of these things as sources of information.
Definitely.
I'm sure you also had a similar situation like that. But my parents were also teachers. And when I was reading about your love for languages and the languages that you did, I immediately saw my dad in them. He is that stock of what they call royal readers. The education system pre-1948, I think it was a British type of education system. And they did English, the royal reader kind of English, and Latin. So my dad loved Latin, and he would break down the English words and trace them from Latin and sometimes to Greek. And
I love it.
So as I was reading, I was like, oh, okay, it reminds me of my dad. Anyway, so you grew up in that family. obviously education was an important thing in the family. So how, you know, I'm not sure where we're going to bring in the issue of the health challenges. I think maybe if you can intersperse it as we move along, you know, because the other way is to just focus on the education side, you know, and come later to that. But maybe it would make more sense to just say, you know, as I was schooling, this, that, you know. So your early schooling days, how were they?
Well, I went to quite a small school. I went to Anglican schools, and the primary school was a very small school. It was a girls' school where we had very small classes. So I had 16 pupils in my class, more or less. It varied between 16 and 21, but that was it.
Yeah.
And it was a very protected type of schooling. It was a lovely school. It was mostly a kind place where people behaved decently and so forth. Not always, but I mean, mostly it was.
There was no bullying.
Sorry?
I'm saying there was no bullying.
No, I don't remember bullying. I mean, people would have a fight or get cross or something, but it wouldn't be some of the things I've heard happen to friends of mine at other schools, which sounded horrifying. I mean, bordering on criminal sometimes, but so it was a very small school. Oh, I did want to say one thing while you were talking about your father's love of languages. One of my proudest moments was when my grandfather got me a dictionary and showed me how to use it. I think it's because they taught me how to read, so I'd keep reading things and finding words I didn't know the meaning of and then asking everyone. So eventually they said, no, this is a dictionary and this is how you use it. And that opened up a whole other world of wonderful things for me, because I could then find out what the roots of the words were, all the Latin and Greek roots and things. And I still do it to this day. If I'm not sure what a word means, especially a Latinate type word, I'll break it down. I'll think, oh, this part means this and that part means that. So it probably means something like this. So it's kind of fun. It's like puzzle solving for me. So maybe if I can just back up a little bit, I actually fell ill when I was 8 months old. So I was very, very young. And I don't remember a time before kidney disease because of that. I developed something or came down with something called hemolytic uremic syndrome, which as a doctor you'd probably know. But yeah. So, and I think it's sometimes known as Gass's syndrome and sometimes known as hamburger disease and so on. It can be caused by various things. I think in my case, they're not quite sure what caused it. At one point, they thought it might have been an infected flea bite of some sort, but maybe I just reacted to some pathogen that no one else reacted to in quite the same way. So what happened was, I was 8 months old and I fell ill quite suddenly. At first, it just seemed to be some sort of childhood problem. I had a fever, bit of an upset stomach, but it soon became clear that it was something much more serious and I had to go to hospital. I was starting to have seizures because of the fever, they thought, but it turned out possibly it was due to something else. They discovered, I mean, to cut a long story short, the medical team discovered that I was bleeding internally. So I was bleeding. Apparently, I bled on the brain. That's possibly why I was having the seizures, not due to the fever. I was bleeding. My bowel was bleeding. I burst a hole in my heart. Many things went wrong, including kidney damage. So I stayed in hospital for about 6 weeks. My condition stabilized. I had a couple of blood transfusions. And I was discharged, but it took me a very long time to become well again. My mother said it took about a year. That because I'd had heart damage, I'd had liver damage, I'd had kidney damage. There were a lot of things that had to be healed. And I healed pretty well, but my mum was a nurse. And what she thought was, if she has Gass's syndrome, she can't possibly be okay. There's got to be residual kidney damage. So she took me to a nephrologist and he checked me out and they established that I did actually have kidney damage. I would think I was about 7. I'd already started school. I was young. I felt much as I'd always felt. But then suddenly it was like the mom hit panic stations, and we had to clean out the kitchen and get rid of foods I couldn't eat, and we had to monitor my diet. And I think my blood pressure was starting to climb a bit, so I was going on to blood pressure medication. And it was actually quite scary for me as a child. I didn't understand why, and I found the food thing particularly difficult. I felt really resentful about it because suddenly all the fun foods were gone.
You ate them, yeah.
There were no chips, chocolate, whatever, it was all gone. So I didn't have a very good attitude towards that, but I had to learn how to manage my condition. And because my mother was a nurse, she tried to make sure that I would be able to manage it from an early age.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've just got something caught around my leg here. There we go.
No problem.
Okay. So she tried to teach me about my condition and why I needed to manage it and what I needed to do to manage it, because she said, I'm not going to be there to look after you all the time when you're a grown up.
Yeah.
And you're going to have this for life. So you have to understand what to do. And that made me angry as well as frightened, because I thought, but where's mommy going?
Yeah.
And I said, but why? And she said, look, so I said, so when are you not going to be there? And she said, I don't know, but at some point you're going to have to manage this.
Yes.
So by the time I was 9, I actually was able to be responsible, for example, for my medication. So, I mean, obviously mom would oversee it, but she trained me so that I had to come to her and say, I need to take my pills and I need to take this and that.
Yeah.
So I was taking antihypertensives and medication for gout by that stage as well, because my joints were starting to hurt.
Yeah.
So I could do all of that, and it turned out to be a good thing, because when I was 9, she fell seriously ill and she nearly died.
Yeah.
So I ended up staying with my grandparents for about a year, and my grandmother had glaucoma, and she wasn't able to do things. Okay, I wouldn't have to explain for you, but maybe for some of your viewers.
Yeah.
This would have been the mid-70s. And
Yeah.
back then, the medication I had to take was designed for grown-ups, but I was a child. Right. So we had to cut the pills into quarters, and they were very hard. They were physically very dense, so they were hard to cut. And my grandmother couldn't do it because of her eyesight, so I had to do it. And I dreaded it because every month we go to the clinic, we'd see my doctor and get the medication. It couldn't have been every month, it must have been every 3 months.
Yeah.
And then I would have to spend what felt like half my life sitting at the kitchen table cutting things up. Sorry?
Create the quarter of the tablet.
Yeah. So I had to do that. And I also then had to remember to take it. And I think because it was clear to me that my grandparents were very worried about my mother and so on, I didn't want to add to their worry. So I didn't want them then to have to worry about me as well. So I had to straighten up and make sure I took things the way I was supposed to, so that when they asked me, I could say, yes, I've taken this, I've taken that, whatever, and they didn't have to chase me. So it turned out to be a good thing, but it was a difficult way to learn. And then, so my condition seemed pretty stable through primary school, and I could play sports. I didn't play team sports or anything like that. We had school sports and we had to play it. When I went to high school, I started finding things a little bit more difficult physically, but I didn't notice. It was a very gradual, slow decline at first. So I didn't really notice things were getting difficult. And it was only many years later in hindsight that I started to see more or less when things took a turn for the worse. I thought I'd put it down to puberty and being tired or whatever, but it wasn't really. It was more sinister than that.
Yeah. But mommy had recovered from the scare just before you turned 10.
Yes. Yeah, she was hospitalized. She actually had septic arthritis. She was, but it hadn't been diagnosed. So it sort of, I mean, she ended up being hospitalized for about 7 months, and it took her months to recover again. She'd had a hip replacement. It was really quite bad, but she did recover. So she was okay. And then, and then she was, or seemed to be normally healthy from then.
So it didn't really, your health challenge then didn't have a major impact in terms of your schooling, in terms of performance, your academics, or even participation in sports. Although in high school, you were starting to slow down a little bit, but on the academic side, there wasn't any impact really.
No, look, I think I was more tired than I probably would have been under different circumstances. So that would limit the amount of energy and focus I could put into things. But in the early part of high school, I think it was mild. It was relatively mild. As it went on, it became a little bit more severe. By the time I got to first year university, it was noticeable. I was impaired by then.
Yeah.
So it would have been, I mean, I do remember my kidney specialist saying that I shouldn't actually do school sports after the age of about, I think he said around 14-ish, something like that. But that scared me. So I thought, I didn't like school sports and I found them very tiring, but I insisted on doing them because I didn't want to be the girl who was too sick to do any sport, because that made me feel frightened. It wasn't so much not wanting to look odd. It was more like not wanting to be ill. So I thought I'd pretend I wasn't.
So as you were in high school, did you already have an idea of the kind of career that you wanted to pursue, going into university? Or at that time, you had not really formulated any ideas of what you really wanted to do post-matric?
I had lots of different ideas of things I'd wanted to do. So, for example, I wanted to be, I've always wanted to be a writer. So I wanted to do that since I was about 7. I wanted to be a hermit at one point because my grandparents had a book in which there was a picture of a hermit who was surrounded by animals in a forest. And I thought, that's where I want to live.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd be a hermit. Then they told me I couldn't because we were Anglican and not Catholic. Anyway, that turned out not to be true, but
well, there's so much similarity between Anglicans and Catholics. I mean, if you look at it, and one broke up from another one. So there's, I mean, I was raised an Anglican as well, and when I came to a Catholic church, I'm not very lost. There's, I mean, their rituals and the stuff they do is very, very similar. Yeah.
Exactly. But anyway, at home they were kind of more conservative about that sort of thing. So it was like the Catholics are very different from us, but they weren't. But so I wanted to be a hermit. I wanted to be a microbiologist at one point. There were all sorts of things I wanted to do, but mainly I wanted to be a writer, and I hadn't thought further about it than that.
Yeah.
When I went up to university, we had to register. I knew that I'd be doing an arts degree because I was more interested in the arts. But we had to register, and I hadn't chosen my subjects. I remember standing in the line, and everybody else seemed to know what they were going to register for. And I was like, so I thought, okay, well, I better pick some subjects quickly. So I was going down the list of subjects, going, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. So eventually, I ended up picking things that I did know. So that's why I ended up with English and French. And then what else did I do? Oh, I wanted to do classical civilization because it was ancient history and it sounded fun. And I'd always wanted to know what philosophy was. So I decided I'd do that. So that's how I chose my subject.
And so what did you major in, for your undergrad?
I majored in English and classics. So it was a very traditional degree. I was, as you noticed in my CV, I was looking at 19th and 20th century British and American literature. I was kind of, I don't know how to explain it. I was fixated on the 19th century particularly. I was only doing 20th century things because we had to choose other credits. But the 19th century, for some reason, was my happy space.
Any particular reason for that? Is it maybe there were writers in that age that you liked? I mean, when was Shakespeare?
He was before then. He was a couple of hundred years before. I mean, Shakespeare's lovely, but for some reason, I think it was a couple of different things. I felt I could actually identify with some of because I'd had a very, in some ways, traditional upbringing. I felt I could identify with some of the ideas I was reading about. The schools I went to were quite old-fashioned in a lot of ways as well. And so, yeah, it kind of there was that sort of connection. I think there was also something else which may sound a little strange. My grandfather's father was 100 years older than me. I didn't know him. I mean, he
Yeah.
died long before I was born. But the point is, he was born in the middle of the 19th century.
Yeah.
And he'd had a very strong influence on my grandfather's life. And since my grandfather had pretty much been my father figure and had pretty much brought me up, it was almost as if I had a direct connection to the 19th century through my grandfather. And I'd had a slightly more old-fashioned upbringing because of them. I'd learned to speak in a more old-fashioned way and behave in a more old-fashioned way. And I think I just felt more at home there. And as you mentioned, a lot of the literature I enjoyed was actually 19th century. I ended up, spending a lot of time on that sort of thing.
You know, when I was looking at your honors thing, the 19th and 20th century in, British and American English, and it was like, okay, actually, I mean, when we look at our computers, they will ask you English UK or English USA, and I'm like, where did this difference come about? Why we have English UK and English, here in South Africa, we tend to be English UK, And I was like, okay, because my son is in the US and the English that he speaks compared to the English that he was speaking before he went to the US, it's totally different,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's because when people went over from Britain, English-speaking people obviously went over from Britain to America, it was, goodness, when was it? Like the 1600s, something like that. It was a long time ago. But the point is, they went over there and developed their own type of, language develops. It's a living thing.
Yeah.
So then you had two sort of groups of people speaking English, but in different parts of the world. And I think it just evolved in a certain way. So some of the American ways of spelling, for example, are actually a little bit more old-fashioned than the British ways, although they may not look like it. For instance, so they kept those things, but then they would modernize other things. And with the British English, it was vice versa.
Yeah. Now, as I was thinking about literature in English, obviously, I only did that up until high school, up until matric. I remember we used to call that standard 8, which is grade 10 now. We did Hamlet, that's Shakespeare. We did Twelfth Night, so to be or not to be. And if music be the food of love, play on, that's all Shakespeare stuff. But my dad loved William Wordsworth type of, the poems. And I mean, obviously the Daffodils were one of those poems that he always just, he would just, he used to love a drink, a drink or two. So when he's nice and warm, he will just take us through those things. But anyway, so all right, and so you got your undergrad, you majored in those two, English and what was the other one now?
The classics.
The classics, and then you did your honors, and then later on you then decided I'm doing my master's. So I think about 3 years later you did your master's, and you had an interesting thesis there as well. The topic. What motivated that?
Well, I did my honors over 2 years. I did my honors part-time because by that stage I was on dialysis. Yeah. So I finished my bachelor's degree. I enjoyed a lot of it, but it was physically extremely difficult for me to do. I mean, I was so unwell that I couldn't even climb flights of stairs. So going around campus at Wits, where everything's hilly and everything has stairs, it was a bit of a nightmare. In the end, it was just, I was dragging myself around. So I wanted to go straight on with honors, but I physically, I couldn't. So I took a year off in which I was put onto dialysis. Towards the end of that year, I got onto dialysis. When I was on dialysis, I was also on the transplant list.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was going to get the call, or hoped I was going to get the call, but I wouldn't, of course, know when, because I was waiting for a non-related donor.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing my honors part-time because I needed to know that if I got the call, I wouldn't miss my exams and lose my whole degree, because that seemed to be the alternative when I checked with the department. So I did my honours over 2 years. So and then straight after that, I went into my master's. I'd actually really enjoyed my honours. I had my transplant in the first year. Yes, in the first year at the exam time, as it happened. So it turned out to be a good choice to split the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But being on the waiting list, transplant waiting list. Maybe let's start just before then. When you were told that you now have chronic renal failure, these kidneys have they've basically packed up. The only way to prolong your life is to give you, put you on an artificial kidney, which is basically, dialysis, and you'll have to do it so many days, a week, and we're crossing fingers that you get a match, and usually, I mean, in other people, there's live donation, or it could be somebody who has passed. So that waiting period, how was it, from a psychological point of view? Just waiting for something you don't know when it's going to happen.
It was actually really difficult. And also, I mean, for some of your younger listeners, I should maybe point out that this was in the late 80s, early 90s. So we didn't, although mobile phones existed, I mean, I think one person I knew had one. I mean, nobody really had them. So it's not like people could phone you and say, listen, we've got a kidney for you. You'd have to kind of be home, or you'd have to have a pager.
Yeah,
or something, because otherwise
I was going to talk about the pagers, because those days that's the only thing that could allow you to be connected quickly, the pagers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I didn't have one. We were kind of short of money and so on, so I didn't have a pager. And I ended up hanging around home a lot, hoping that the phone would ring, which sounds a bit gruesome, but I mean, it was that uncertainty where you don't know what you're planning for.
Yeah.
So, for example, you'd think, goodness, I don't feel well. I don't know, should I continue with this degree? Should I go on? And then you think, okay, but now what if I don't get the kidney? Then I'm going to stay in limbo and not feel well and not have a degree. And what if I never get a kidney? Because some people don't. What if it takes me 5 years to get one? I believe the average waiting time is something like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah. It is. Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. So they'd hoped that I'd get a related living donor kidney, but unfortunately the relatives who volunteered were not a good enough match.
That's for you. Yeah.
So I ended up, And one of the people who would have possibly been a good enough match kind of didn't commit or not commit for 2 years and then decided not to. So then things didn't work out with that. That's why it took so long for me to get onto dialysis. And I was so unwell by the time we got on, by the time I got on. So it was, first of all, it was the waiting to see whether or not we'd get onto dialysis and wondering how bad things would be before that happened. Then I chose peritoneal dialysis. I didn't choose hemo. And I chose peritoneal. I know it's considered in some ways a kind of the less good option.
Yes.
Yeah, for a range of reasons. 90% of people who go onto dialysis go onto hemo, which is the kidney machine. Obviously, you would know, but your listeners may not.
Yeah.
So peritoneal dialysis is a different system. So you've got an abdominal catheter, and you run sterile, I'm trying to think, was it a saline solution or a sugar solution? But anyway, the point is you run a special solution into your gut cavity and and then it acts, it's very clever, very simple. It acts as like a filtering thing, or rather it filters the toxins out and leaves the rest of the stuff in. So the only reason, there were two reasons I chose that. The one reason was that I have an absolute fear of needles, and I couldn't bear the thought of being needled 3 times a week. I just thought, I can't do this if I've got to do that. So I decided, that kind of made up my mind. And then the other thing was that you didn't have to go into a clinic to do it, you could do it at home. And that seemed easier for me, more efficient, more pleasant, kind of hospital.
Than going to be connected to a machine that then does the filtering on your behalf. But I mean, you must move from the house, somebody must take you there, you spend 5 hours there or whatever, every so many times a week. Yeah.
Yeah. And it would have been by that stage, my grandparents had passed on, and it was really just my mother and me. And Mum was trying to work full time, and I just thought she can't be doing this as well as hauling me around to hospitals and so on. It's too much. Now, at least
Yeah.
if it's at home, I can control it.
Yeah.
So actually, my grandfather was still alive, but he wasn't really driving at that point and so on. But anyway, but the point is, Mum was the only driver, and she couldn't. Yeah. So then when I got onto dialysis, because the medical team felt a bit bad about my situation, and they felt that maybe, you know, they'd prolonged things, they bumped me up the transplant list a bit to sort of make up for lost time. They'd hoped that I would be able to avoid going on to dialysis, but I wasn't able to. And I must admit, I felt so much better on dialysis that it was just, I mean, there was a lot of worry, and you're constantly monitoring your medical condition, and you know, but I felt so much better. I could run upstairs, not walk, I could run up them. So that was really, it was like magic. I thought, this is cool.
Something you had not done in quite a while.
In years, yeah. I suddenly felt so much clearer headed. I was sleeping better. I could do mild exercise. A friend of my mother's gave me an old exercise bike of hers, and there was a physiotherapist in the hospital who worked out exercise routines for the dialysis people, but I was one of the few people who actually did the exercises, and they made a huge difference. That's probably why she wanted us to do them. but it was really nice being a little bit fitter and having a better cardiovascular system. And it has made a huge change.
Yes. And how long did you stay in dialysis before you got that call you had been waiting for?
It was almost a year. I went onto dialysis in late October, early November of 1990, and I got the transplant in early October 91.
91.
So
this is just after you had finished your undergrad, your BA, which was in 1990. All right, and then you were going for your honors, which you were going to take 2 years. So in between there, that's when you actually got the call. And you know, how did you feel, you know, on the day?
Well, it was actually
happy.
You have strangely mixed feelings, actually, or I did. Okay, first of all, it was the third call. So with the first call, it was shortly after my grandfather had died, and it was shortly after that, and the medical staff, when they realized that we just had a fairly serious loss in the family, said, look, this isn't the best time for you to be doing this. You need to be okay emotionally to cope with this. So I missed that kidney. And then there was another one a few months later in the middle of winter, but I had a very bad chest infection. So I couldn't have it because of the anti-rejection meds I'd have to go on to. So I missed that one. I took quite a knock with that chest infection. I didn't feel the same after I got better. So I started to feel scared because I thought, you know, if I get sick like this next winter, I may not make it if I'm still on dialysis. And then the third call came in spring, in October. And I have to tell you the story of what happened. It was very strange. So I was an honors student, and we don't have, for the sorts of subject I was in, you don't really have a lot of classes at an honors level. You have like weekly seminars, and because I'd split my degree over 2 years, I didn't have classes. I think I had classes on one day, on the Tuesday or the Wednesday or something. Anyway, but the point is, it was a Thursday, and I remember this because I didn't have any classes. For some reason, I decided to go into campus. The reason was that I had to finish an essay, and it was I was doing a film as narrative course, and we didn't have a video recorder at home, a video player, so I had to go in to use the university's one, so I could watch the movie that I had to analyze. So I went in, I watched the movie. I came out. And as I stepped out of the Performing Arts Library into the Wartenweiler, the main library there, I bumped into this nursing sister and a social worker. And I was
Yeah.
surprised to see them there. And I said, "Oh, hello, what brings you here?" And they said, "Thank goodness we found you."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, yeah, no, it's lovely to see you too. But anyway, why are you here?" And they said, "We've got a kidney for you. You have to go." And I said, "No, seriously, why are you here?" And
Yeah.
they said, "We've been trying to find you. We phoned your home. You weren't there. We've we tried phoning your mum's work, but she's out of office at the moment. They'd done something else, and eventually they said, we're going to, she's a student, she must be at university," which shows you they don't know students very well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So they said, "So we came to campus, and then we went to your department, but no one knew where you were, and you didn't have any classes. And then we thought, but she must be in the library then," which
Yeah.
I was. But I mean, it was a mere coincidence that I was
Yeah.
there.
But
So
that was,
they,
but
sorry?
it showed the commitment that they
Yeah,
had in, in being part of a solution in terms of your, health
absolutely.
challenge. Yeah. Not many people would go around, they'll just go, "Oh, we can't find her, that's it." But
Yeah, where's
they
the
made
next
sure that
one?
they found you. Mm.
Yeah, I think they afterwards explained to me that because I'd missed two kidneys already, and this was, another opportunity, they didn't want me to miss the third one. So they made
Yeah.
a bit of extra effort to try and find me, which they really didn't have to do.
Yeah.
So they grabbed me, and I said, the first thing I said was, I can't do this. I've got to submit an essay next week or whenever. I can't be doing this now. And they said, "Listen, we've been spent the whole morning trying to find you. You have to go to hospital."
Yeah.
So I went to hospital, and we had to run up hospital street to get to the transplant unit, which was at the other end of the hospital. And we went there, and everyone was waiting, and they were surprised that the nurse and the social worker had found me,
Yeah.
because they were about to hand it over to the next person.
Yeah.
So I mean, I didn't even have a chance really to think. We had to try to hunt my mother down and find her. I ended up phoning around some of her friends, and it turned out she was actually visiting one of them. So we managed to get hold of her, and then I got whipped into surgery and whipped out again.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long? So obviously the operation went well, and any challenges, after the op, issues around scares around rejection or
Mm.
anything like that?
Yes, yes, there were. The surgery went pretty well. It was a relatively short surgery. Everybody loved my cardiovascular system that I'd been working so hard on.
Yeah.
So I was really happy about that. And everything was great for about a week after I came out. And then I started having an acute rejection episode. So the medical team had to give me more anti-rejection medication. I had to stay in hospital. It settled down. That was great. A couple of days after that settled down, another one started up. So we started to have more medication.
Mm.
And then that settled down. And then not too long after that, I was still in hospital. I started a chronic rejection episode. And suddenly no one was so cheerful anymore. With the acute ones, they were saying things like, "This happens all the time. It's just the kidney settling down."
Yeah.
And with the second one, they were also saying it, but not quite as enthusiastically. By the time it came to the chronic one, people were looking quite worried. So they gave me cortisone blasts. They did everything they could do, but it didn't break the rejection episode. It
Yeah.
just my levels just kept rising. I kept on rejecting, and you
Mm.
feel really weird with these. It's your body fighting the foreign
Yeah.
protein. Yeah,
Yes.
so
Yes.
it
Yes.
feels almost like a type of a flu.
Mm.
It feels very unpleasant, and then with all the meds, you feel bad as well. And eventually, they the head of the unit said to me, "Listen, you're going to have to accept that you've lost your kidney."
Yeah.
And I said, "But I haven't lost it. I've still got it. It's still working. It's passing urine. It's doing everything right." He said,
Mm.
"Yes, but it's rejecting, and we can't break this rejection episode. We're just going to have to accept that this isn't going to work."
Yeah.
And I couldn't bear it. It felt like being given a death sentence. I mean, I
Yeah.
know that you wouldn't necessarily die from this, but
Yeah.
the thought of all that trauma and drama, and then all the surgeries, and having to go back onto dialysis, and next time maybe the kidney wouldn't work as well because you've now had all the antibodies and so on. And I just thought, I can't do this. And I just said, no, I we've got to keep fighting. And I kept arguing with the poor man until eventually every time he said, we've got to do this, I'd say no because of. And anyway, eventually I think he became frustrated. He said, fine, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want another cortisone blast. So he said, fine, well, it won't do you any good, but it won't do you any harm. So have another cortisone blast. So I did, and it worked.
So, I mean, there you were. The specialist is telling you that, look, I think we have lost this thing, but you were assertive enough to actually say to the specialist, you know what, try more, you know, because sometimes those kind of decisions, somebody's making them because the articles that they have read to say, if this and that happens, the survival rate is this or whatever, you know. But
exactly,
you know what, again, with you, you know, with that Christian background, you know, and knowing that ultimately, you know, there's a guy upstairs who gives us all the wisdom, even those specialists, you know, I mean, give it a try. Don't just, you know, it's still working. The kidneys are still working. Yes,
yeah, it wasn't dead.
Perfect. You were not dead. Just give me a chance. And it worked.
Yes, and I mean, when the prof tried to explain to me why it wouldn't work, he did exactly what you described. He said, look, I've read these articles, and he whipped out, he had files with him, and he said, look, these files show trends. If this happens here, then this happens there. And I said, I just said, I'm not a statistic. I'm not just a number, I'm a person. And I don't think that it's time to call it quits yet.
Yes. And you were right.
And I was right. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did things stabilize? You know, when now at least that big scare, you know, everyone settled down, and then you got back to, I would say, normal life now.
Okay, so I stayed in hospital about 3 weeks. I was then discharged once the rejection episode had broken, but I had to keep coming back for tests and checkups and so on quite often, especially because of the situation. However, unfortunately, because of all the anti-rejection meds, I think I picked up a virus probably from my kidney. So then the next 2 months was spent at bed rest with sort of I want to say heart issues. I mean, I don't have heart damage, but it sort of made me. It was like a type of a viral thing. I ended up with palpitations and sort of, So we lowered my anti-rejection meds so that I could fight off the virus, and my results were stable. So by January, I was able to start going back to university.
Yeah.
And one of the first things I noticed when I went back to campus to find out what I needed to do to register and how I needed to sign up for the new classes and everything, or the new modules and so on, it was the strangest thing. I was walking through from Senate House to Central Block, and they've got these big fire doors, these big like draft doors, which normally you have to pull like this, or I was so used to pulling them with my whole body weight. And so I heaved on the door and it flew backwards. I didn't realize how weak I'd been, even on dialysis. Now I had a normal sort of strength and I could open doors like a normal adult instead of sort of pulling them. And I suddenly thought, wow, I'm so strong. I felt like Superman. It was like walking on air. So that's when I started to feel that I was really recovering. And every year after that, for 5 years, I felt even better. I felt stronger, I felt better. They changed my meds so the doses were better, there were fewer side effects. And so every year I felt better. I had my transplant when I was 22. So by the time I was in my mid-20s, my mid to kind of late 20s, I started to realize that I hadn't felt well before transplant. I hadn't felt well since I was about 12.
That's a long
I didn't
time.
notice it,
Almost like 10 years continuously.
Yeah. Wow. That the last time I could remember feeling that good, I'd been 12.
Yeah. All right. So at least now you had regained your health. You could resume your studies and continue dreaming. So and then what happened?
So I finished my honours, and that was the following year. I finished the honours because it had been in the middle of my honours year that I'd had the transplant, and I'd really enjoyed my honours. I found it very stimulating. I thought, well, I want to do a master's degree, and I could get a bursary now because I could study full time and so on.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, well, let me do that, and that's why I decided to go to do. I looked at, I was, when I was thinking about your questions a bit earlier on, um, I need to explain what I did my master's on.
Yeah.
So in the 19th century, in the
Yeah.
19th century, there's most people would know Charles Dickens. He's a famous
Yes.
19th century writer. He
Yeah.
had a friend called Wilkie Collins who wrote detective fiction.
Yeah.
And Collins was known for writing the first novel-length British detective story. And I blanked out. I think it was The Woman in White. I should know because I studied this, but anyway, it was a long time ago. And he's known as a master of suspense. And in fact, although he's in many ways he's not as good a writer as Dickens, he's not in some ways as interesting technically and so on. He's a much better suspense writer, and Dickens learned a lot from Collins. You can see it in his later work. You can see exactly when he met Collins because of how his writing changes.
Yeah.
And Collins had trained as a lawyer, so he based all his stories on real life crime.
Yeah.
And it made me laugh because one of my hobbies is looking at real life crime on YouTube, sadly. And so I've never quite got away from doing that.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting to see how Collins took a real life story or a real life event and then reinterpreted it as a novel. What he put in, what he left out, whose voices you hear, whose voices are left out. It's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
complicated. It's more complex than you'd think.
Yeah. So, but that was stimulating you. That was giving you so much interest, and you like, I need to go deeper. This honors thing, it's not enough. I think there's more to
Yeah.
this thing. Yeah.
You start to see what's possible.
Yeah.
So I did all of that, but I think I was also a little bit burnt out. I chose my topic quite quickly because I wanted to do a master's degree. I wanted to do master's research. So I chose my topic quite quickly, and I chose it partly because my late grandfather had loved, Wilkie Collins had been one of the writers he'd loved. So I
Yeah.
chose it because of him,
Yeah.
which was fine. And it was interesting to a point, but it wasn't maybe something I could really stay interested in for long. So I just didn't, I ended up rushing through the degree to finish it because to be honest, I got a bit bored.
Yeah. Yes. No. No. I'm looking at your title now of that master's. Uh, what sort of a narrative? What part of a narrative, an investigation of narrative, duplicity, and reader's position in three novels of Wilkie Collins. Yeah.
Yeah. So I looked at, they're very quite exciting stories actually, and they're more exciting if you know the real stories behind them. But they're stories where you've got people who are unreliable narrators. They sound convincing, but when you hear the other people's stories, you realize somebody's not telling the truth. It can't be both this and that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
who's lying to you?
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
start to mistrust every narrator in the story.
Yeah. 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 All right. All right. So you got your master's. You are still at Wits. So all the time you're a Wits student. And Wits, obviously, if you look at these universities in South Africa, those days, I'll say in up until the 80s, you had almost like three types of universities. You had what we would say English premier, or elite universities. Would have Afrikaans elite universities, and you also then had what one would say more homeland type of universities. So you were in a premium English speaking, university.
Yeah.
But then after you obtained your master's, you then switched to Matis, which is University of Stellenbosch. Yeah, I just want to see that transition, how it happened,
Yeah.
moving from what one would say English liberal university to more Afrikaans, a bit conservative type of university, and you've specialized in English, and that environment there is actually largely Afrikaans. But yes, they were going to allow you to head, the English lab, within there. Yeah, just there.
Well. That's a very interesting question, and there. I'll tell you what happened. So first of all, you should know I haven't been wildly good at planning things in my life, because I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm in the arts, but also maybe it's because maybe because of my medical situation and so on. It's just I've never really sort of thought really far into the future. And I
Yeah.
think by the time I got to doing my master's, it was more a case of, and the next step is this, instead of thinking, well, in 20 steps time I want to do, it was more a case of I can control the next step and I think I'll do that. So I did my master's, I finished that. Mum retired at more or less the same time, and she wanted to come down to the Cape because her her younger brother. She had two younger brothers. Her youngest brother had died very young. He'd had severe asthma issues, and he'd left behind a young widow and two very young children, and they'd moved down to the Cape
Yeah.
because my aunt's mom was down here.
Mm.
So mum wanted to spend more time with her nephews. She was very close to her younger brother, and she wanted to spend more time with her nephews. So she wanted to move to the Cape. What I didn't know was she also had she'd had rheumatic fever. We seem to be a very ill family. She'd had rheumatic fever as a child, so she had heart damage, and I didn't realize that that was starting to become a serious problem.
Mm.
So, and that she'd actually wanted to move because she knew she wasn't going to live very long. I wasn't
Yeah.
fully aware of that. So
And she didn't share that with you. You know, she kept
yeah.
you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think she tried to, in a way, share it with me, but it's a hard thing to discuss.
Yeah.
And I think if it's your child, you probably also don't want to scare and worry them more than necessary. And with everything else that had been going on, it hadn't
Yeah.
been a focus. So we moved down to the Cape, and we moved down here without really having a plan beyond sort of getting a job and doing whatever. I thought I'd maybe apply for a scholarship. I did apply. I didn't. I did a scholarship for an overseas university to do a PhD, but I didn't get the scholarship. And then, unfortunately, my mother died unexpectedly. She had a heart attack, and she, maybe fortunately for her, it was very quick, but it was a terrible shock for me.
Yeah.
And we'd been down here a couple of years. The place we'd been working in had closed down, and I was kind of stuck down here without any job
Mm.
or anything. It was really a very, very difficult period. I got a job in a bookshop. This is how I came to work at Stellenbosch. So I got a part-time job in a bookshop, which I really liked. But it wasn't earning a really super living. And one
Yeah.
of the people I was working with was married to someone who worked in the English department at Stellenbosch, and they were
Yeah.
looking for tutors. Now, that's not lecturers, that's literally just
Mm.
people to run classes for some of the students, like what do they call them in America? Adjunct teaching staff or something like
Yeah.
that. But they they were looking, they needed some extra tutors in a hurry, and my friend suggested that they interview me, maybe because I had a master's, so I was qualified for it, and they were struggling to find qualified
Yeah.
people at short notice. So they they did invite me for an interview, and I got the tutoring position, and that was just a part-time position.
Yeah.
um, and then at some point towards the end of the first year, that would have been 2000, this writing lab was advertised through the Afrikaans and Dutch department.
Yes.
So a senior lecturer there, wanted to start a writing lab, a writing center actually, and he wanted an Afrikaans head and an English head. He wanted it to be a fully bilingual
Bilingual. Yeah.
center, and they were advertising, and I hadn't seen the advert, but somebody in the department saw it, and she approached me and said, listen, I think you should apply for this, it sounds perfect for you. And I said, I don't know, what's this writing center thing? I don't know what that is. And she said, no, seriously, I think you should apply. And I said, I don't know. And basically she bullied me into applying, so I
Yeah.
did. And then I got it. So, and it was a full-time job with a proper salary, so I was delighted.
Yes.
So that's how
And
I came to work at Stellenbosch.
is this around 2011?
Sorry?
Is this around 2011?
No,
Uh,
this was in early
oh,
2001.
okay. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, 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 yes. So you got the job. You were in this new thing, writing lab, And yeah, so how did you find, being part of, basically being a pioneer? Obviously, you are working with somebody else who was heading the African side. So the two of you
Yeah.
were pioneers in that sense.
Well, it was actually surprisingly fun. I mean, I never knew such a thing as this existed, this writing center thing. We called it a writing center back then, but we soon changed it to a writing lab because the language center formed, and you can't have a center in a center and so on.
Yeah.
So it was actually really fun. My colleague was new to Stellenbosch. I was kind of new, but I'd been there a year. But I say in inverted commas English. I mean, my family comes from lots of different places, but I mean, I'm English speaking, so I would be English there. And my colleague is a person of color and Muslim, so she was also she was like me, a bit of an outsider.
Yeah.
And we got on well, and we found it really exciting. Suddenly setting this thing up, finding out how to do the work and what needed to be done, how to get students to come, how to tell people what the strange thing was when we weren't sure ourselves.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of fun, and and a third colleague, there was a third colleague, there still is, she and I still work together, who was doing the admin. So Anna Marie was doing the admin, and Sharifa and I were running the
actual
academic part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And our brief was to, sorry.
Yeah, your brief was.
Our brief was to develop a way of teaching students writing, but on a one-to-one basis rather than a class. So instead of just running a class, going put in a topic sentence or something, it was more a case of sitting down with a single student and their work, and then helping them to develop their writing so that the next time they write, they'll do it differently. That's essentially what we do, and there are different ways of doing it.
Was it motivated to set up this language center or writing lab? Was it motivated by discovering deficiencies with your students, in terms of their writing ability, undergrad, postgrad, PhD, postdoc?
Yes,
was it solving a problem?
Yeah, that is part of it, but I think a large part of it is also that coming up to write at a university level is difficult. It's a different type of writing than what you do at school or what you do in a profession or elsewhere. It's something that everybody needs to learn. So even if you're good at it, or you turn out to be good at it, or learn it more easily, you're still going to need to learn how to do it. So we try to take a non-deficit type approach. At the same time, people also realize that writing is so important to do well, to be able to communicate ideas and communicate research to other people, that it's an essential skill. It's something you really need to have developed, and to quite a sophisticated level, to be able to do what you need to do with your academic writing. So I think there was an overall need for it, and if you want the university to be sophisticated, top-notch, and to I don't like to say produce graduates, but to graduate students that are produce them like a rabbit from a hat sort of thing.
Yeah.
But produce to graduate students who are able to reflect or be good examples of what comes from that university, and also to be able to be successful in the future, they need to be able to do certain things, and writing is one of them. So that was really the idea behind it. There's also, as I'm sure you're aware, a lot of talk around with the people's love of the internet and more visual ways of communicating and so on, that maybe we're losing some of our more verbal ways of communicating. I'm not really sure about that. My sense is people write more than they did because of all the different media. We just write in different ways. So I think it's, it's a combination of things.
So for you, I mean, you've been, in that center as one of the pioneers. Your colleague has retired now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, but what gives you a kick? What makes you wake up and say, tomorrow, obviously, this is before Corona. This is before COVID-19. But what gives you a kick, you know, to continue doing this work? You know, what challenges you? Because I'm just trying, because it's been a number of years that you've been there. There must be something evolving, something that you are still looking forward to achieving, you know, as you support undergrads, postgrads, you know, doc and all of those things. And obviously you're also doing other work, you know, reviewing journals, publishing your own articles and all of that. But just from your point of view, what gives you that kick?
Well, I think one of the things that has always given me a kick, and I say this as you have to understand, this is quite a big discovery for me. I say this as an introvert. Yeah. I'm as much as I like people, I really like my space and privacy and peace and quiet. But I've always been surprised at how much I actually enjoy working with students. I actually love it. I find them really, I feel really privileged being able to work with them. I find them easy to work with. I find them fun. I find them full of new and interesting ideas. So for me, that part of it's easy. It's something I look forward to. And because we do a lot of work with postgrads, I also see a lot of interesting research. My interests are actually quite broad. So being able to have not exactly a research finger in every pie, but to have a sort of a sense of what's being researched in this and that field is nice. I mean, you feel as if you're part of things. So, yes. So I find it intellectually stimulating and also personally and emotionally stimulating. And you said, you know, things might have changed since Corona, but oddly enough, it actually hasn't. So this is what happened. We closed down the lab very suddenly when Corona was starting to roll out here. We actually closed the lab a week before the university shut down because there was a chance that one of our consultants might have been in contact with someone who'd been infected. Yeah. It turned out he hadn't. The person wasn't infected, but they didn't know it at the time. They thought he was. So I realized because we work literally normally face to face with people and we work with a good few thousand students a year. I didn't want us to become a hotspot on campus, and I didn't want the students and the writing consultants and everybody else to get sick. So when I realized there was a possible contact, I just unilaterally closed the lab down and said, we need to shut down now, and we shut down. And we were all panicked, and then the university shut down a week later, and everybody was, you know, flailing around and feeling scared and so on. And while we were flailing, our senior management said, look, you can't just shut the lab down. You can't just go by and leave. And I said, yeah, we're all going to get infected. And they said, okay, well, that's fine, but then you need to go online. And I thought, oh, please, we're trying to deal with a pandemic. Give me a break. But they kept saying, you've got to go online. And eventually you realize you actually have to. So we started moving our offering onto Microsoft, onto online, which meant that we had to change our admin, we had to work out processes, we had to train the consultants to use Teams, which we hadn't used before, and all of this took about a month. So we were busy doing that and sort of crossly muttering and gnashing our teeth privately because we didn't really want to, and we all wanted to rather focus on the pandemic because that was quite big and, you know, foremost in our minds. And then suddenly we started getting emails from students saying, you know, help me, we don't know what to do, we don't know what's going to happen with our studies, you know, our classes have stopped but we still have to hand in assignments, we're scared, we're all alone, I'm stuck here but my family's in Bloemfontein or whatever and I can't go home, or I wanted to go home to see my family, but my gran lives with us and I can't make her sick, so I have to stay here and whatever. So we had a lot of scared and panicked people contacting us, contacting our admin staff on an almost daily basis. And suddenly we started to see that we were still needed despite the pandemic, that students didn't still need to work on their degrees, and they were scared because everything else had been whipped out from under them. And that we had a role to play. And part of it was, we've always valued our interpersonal relationships, but that part of it was so much more important now, and we could make a contribution with that. So that's one of the things that gets me up in the mornings, is knowing that,
So the pandemic it changed the way of doing things, but the need for, making a difference basically to the lives of those, students at different levels was still there. And you just have to
Yes,
fulfill it in a different way.
absolutely.
And
And,
looking
and, and
back now, there's like maybe 4 months now, 5 months of you having done that. How has things been?
it's actually been working very well. We've got increased, the consultation numbers are increasing, so students are getting used to using Teams.
Yeah.
The consultants tell me that they still have to explain to the students how to do things, but that's fine. We just see that as part of the, I think what we privately think of as the calming down phase, where we say,
Yeah.
that's fine. So what you do is you open the document like this.
Yeah.
We worked out ways of still being able to be more personal by using the camera at certain times and not at other times, because
Yeah.
of, it uses up data and so on, but you use it strategically, and then your student doesn't feel as if they're just talking to a screen. They talk to a face. They know what you look like.
Yeah.
So we're learning things, and we're learning things about ourselves. Our colleagues, my colleague who runs the workshop, Selena, has said she's actually surprised at how resilient people are and how kind people are when they're put into these sorts of situations.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways, I would like to think we hadn't lost our humanity, but it's been a way to reconnect with it.
Lovely. Yes. Oh, so looking back now, since you guys started that unit, or the language center, would I say, was the language center before, or the actual center came in with you guys, or is the writing lab is what was new within the language center?
It's actually the other way around. The writing lab actually started before, and then the language center formed a couple of years later, and we became part of it. So yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But it's been
so we've been around longer.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey for you.
Yes.
And value adding, it keeps you awake. It keeps you looking forward to the following day. And it seems, from the experience during the pandemic, clearly it is filling in a void that can actually decide whether somebody gets their PhD or not, get their master's or not. Just for people like me who don't really understand these things, the difference between academic writing and just ordinary writing, what are these things that you need to get right? And I'm asking you this because I'm in the process of submitting my concept note, which I should have done before Corona. The person I'm submitting to is actually a product of Stellenbosch. Is now a head of psychiatry at UKZN, and
is it Bonga?
Yes, Prof. Bonga Kiliza. I'm even scared to phone him because I've delayed so much. But then the other thing, the type of writing that is needed, even for that 5-page thing, it has to be solid. And as you are talking, I'm thinking, okay, do you guys also offer this to people who are not at Matis? If I wanted, privately to just be brushed up on how to write properly.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And if you're oh yes, I see, because you would be signing up at UKZN. I think they have a writing center, or maybe I'm not sure. They had a writing place.
I don't mind coming to Cape Town. It's always very enjoyable to come to that part post-corona. If there's something called, because we don't know how long the virus is going to be with us. But it would be nice to just get the tips, and get some finer skills so that I submit something solid. Yeah. All right.
Definitely.
Now let's move away from the academics now. Two things I want us to talk about. This month, it's Organ Donor Month in South Africa, all right, in terms of the annual health calendar. And I remember in one of your Facebook posts, you actually shared a video from ENCA where they were interviewing a lady who was talking about issues of gender, challenges around, organ donation. where she was saying females are more likely to donate, organs, but they are more likely to have challenges and waiting longer to get organs themselves, and it is an area that I never really thought about. Just when I read or listened to that video, I thought, oh, okay, actually, this makes a lot of sense. But generally, since the time you got an organ to now, do you think the perceptions of people have changed in terms of their willingness to donate? Because sometimes somebody would sign up as a donor, but the family refuses, when that person is there. So do you think in South Africa we are doing enough to actually encourage people to donate, when somebody has passed, for the body to be harvested and have, that gift of life? But again, it's not only those who have passed on. There are many people who, whilst still alive, can donate something. So I just want to, as a recipient of an organ which has given you, new life, what do you think is happening in South Africa? Has there been improvement?
Sure, that's a difficult question. My gut feeling is probably not. The reason I say that is because we don't have a very high rate of donation.
Yes.
I think my impression is that people still often have the same views as I would have seen 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, when I would do some of the organ donor awareness things. If we had a little table somewhere, I might be on the table or manning the table or whatever.
Yes, yes.
And I remember being asked the most stupid questions by people. When I say stupid, what I mean is my impression was that they were doing this deliberately to annoy me, but maybe they weren't. It would be things like, they would say, if you say you're an organ donor, if I say I'm an organ donor and I'm in an accident, will they let me die so that they can take my organs? Well, no, they won't. Okay, that's they can't do that. I mean, why would they do that? And then somebody would say, will they take my organs when I'm alive? Well, no, they wouldn't. I mean, they're not going to pluck you off the street and pull out your organs. It doesn't work like that. And then one guy said to me rather proudly, because he'd worked this out, he said, but you can donate blood when you're alive. Why can't they take your organs when you're alive? And I go, because blood isn't an organ. It's a tissue, it's not an organ.
Yes, but that revealed issues of awareness. There needs to be much more public health awareness around what organ donation is, the types of organs, types of donations, that can be made. And actually, with one person who has passed, the number of people who could benefit, if the person has reached the end of their life,
You can save 7 lives.
So I mean, I would talk now in the Black communities. Again, there are certain myths and around using somebody else's organs or tissues, and again those things need to be broken, because in South Africa right now, with the high prevalence of non-communicable diseases, diabetes, hypertension, so the need for organs even amongst the Black people is so high. And so I mean, we need to find a way to get people to actually be comfortable with actually signing up as organ donors as a country,
Absolutely.
So that's why I wanted to just bring this discussion, because we are in the organ donor month. All right. Now, thank you for your answer. The other part I want is around you and your family of 3 cats. The one who's most popular is PP. I thought, does PP mean public protector? But no. Anyway, he seems to be the one who always takes the nice positions next to you when you're taking those pictures. Yeah, just your relationship with cats. Have you always been somebody who loves animals? Growing up, and your relationship with domestic animals right now as pets. Just a little bit about that.
I've always loved animals. If you remember my wanting to be a hermit, the whole thing that appealed to me with that was all the animals. I'd be with all the animals, and that seemed really nice. Um, I think that runs in the family too. The part of my family is Welsh, and the Welsh part of the family is very good with animals. We seem to be able to relate. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that's a good or bad thing, but we seem to be able to relate to them really well. So, and we've always had pets of different sorts. I've always loved animals. And when I say I love animals, I don't mean just furry, cute ones, but I mean all animals. I like insects, I like frogs, I like whatever. They all fascinate me.
Yeah.
And they're really beautiful. I know that not everybody will see them in that way, but you know, if you actually look at animals instead of in terms of what they're not or how they're different from you, but just in terms of themselves, they're incredibly beautiful.
Mm,
Each and
yeah.
every one of them. I felt I'd just share that. But my cats are the most beautiful.
Yes. But now your cats, all three of them are black, 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 pitch black. Any particular reason why you like those, or maybe I didn't see all of them, but on the picture there's a picture with you and turkeys. I can see and there's three of them eating. You know, the only three that are black, or we've got more than three.
At one point, I had five, but at the moment, I have three. I adopted a very old kitty to keep my other old kitty company, but both of them have passed on. And then I adopted another old kitty because I learned that adopting older cats is actually really nice.
Yeah,
So he just came, he's actually a very dark gray, but he
yeah,
just arrived. I didn't have a choice in his color.
yeah.
But my other old boy was also gray, so he reminded me of him. And then
Oh,
the young boys are black. And I adopted them. I found them all on Facebook. Um, a vet had some unwanted kittens that somebody's cat had, and the person wanted to have them all put down, and the vet was shocked. She said, "No, I'm not going to kill healthy animals." So
mm,
she said, "Does anybody want them?" And I took two of them, and they turned out to be black. So that's the
yeah.
reason, and that also might be the reason that the other person didn't want them, other than the fact that they were unplanned. Some people think black cats are bad luck, but they're not.
Yes, I was actually going to bring that to say in in the black communities, black African communities, for some reason, uh, black cats, they associate them with some funny things happening, maybe a bit of some magic, black magic or whatever. And I remember there was a time, in the soccer teams in South Africa, there's two big soccer teams. Coming from Joburg, you would be aware of Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates. So
Yeah.
before one of those matches at FNB Stadium, then a black cat crossed the field, and the security guards chased this cat and kicked this cat, because they thought that it was part of somebody is trying to predetermine the outcome of the match, through magic. And it became a big thing in the media and stuff. So when I saw the black cats, I thought, okay, I'm definitely gonna ask about this one.
Well, I mean, a lot of white people are mistrustful about cats in general. They see them as being like mean and aloof and so on. And a lot of white people also think that black cats are somehow associated with witchcraft and all, but
Yeah.
really they're just cats that have dark furs.
Yes, yes. All right.
I can vouch for that because mine don't go anywhere without my knowing about it.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. But for you, at an emotional level, what's the connection with them? You know?
I find, uh, at the risk of sounding sort of esoteric or
Yeah,
a bit way out, I love their energy.
yeah,
I find it a very smooth, sort of calming, soothing energy to be around. I find that it's not intrusive, so I like their company. I find them calming, I
yeah.
suppose is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, lovely.
And loving and sweet. I mean, they're very responsive to me. Some people say cats are not, and that they
Yeah,
stay away from you and are aloof, but mine are not. We're
yeah.
lucky that they're not actually here showing
You
you
know,
their bottoms or something.
I see in some of your posts, especially PP. He likes to occupy pride of position, and appear during some of your position. Now, as we are wrapping up, we're wrapping up now. But just reflecting on your life to date, with all the challenges that were brought by the health issues, but you basically overcame those. Just before COVID, were there any anxieties that you had, as somebody who's had, a transplant before? Are you still on any anti-rejection meds, which would then make you maybe a bit of a person who is classified under comorbid risk?
Well, I've been on anti-rejection meds from the 3rd of October 1991.
Yeah.
Still on them. I'm on much lower doses, but I've been on them for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
So my immune system is weaker than it would normally be. And that means that when I do catch things, I tend to catch them worse and I stay sick for longer. I had adult chickenpox about 10 years ago, and I was very ill. I mean, I had to be hospitalized. It was really not funny. I picked up some other childhood disease a couple of years ago, which wasn't as serious. What was it? I don't know, but my lips swelled up, and it was really, I felt ill for weeks and I looked like a duck, but that wasn't so nice.
Yeah.
So you can imagine I wasn't exactly thrilled when we discovered that the virus had come to South Africa. And at first, you don't know what to make of it. I mean, I remember that there was a lot of, there's always some flu or something. You try to keep yourself well, but then you realize this isn't just a flu. And you realize that it can be spread by other means than, somebody sneezing on you or whatever. And you start to become a little bit more concerned.
Yeah.
So basically, I've been in a type of a level 5 lockdown since the middle of March.
Yeah. But I mean, at least, you were taking precautions because you understood your risk profile. And I mean, we are now getting to a point where in South Africa, the numbers are going down. Obviously, we still worry about the second phase and stuff like that. But at least, the peak came in the Western Cape and passed. And your level 5 precautions, have done you well. Right. Now, you mentioned something about your community work, community work in your CV. What kind of things do you do out there in the community? And I think my interest also is around, as you've been going up, as one of the successful, phenomenal females, what kind of empowerment within your areas of influence are you giving to up and coming women, or younger people? Yeah.
So I have to admit, I've had a rather casual approach to to community work. I mean, if I see something that I can contribute to, I will. So for example, if somebody says to me, listen, my cousin is having a transplant, they don't know what to expect, would you like to talk to them? Obviously I would do it. And I will do it for as long as they need me to do it. I mean, I can't give them medical advice, but I can tell them what it's like or answer questions they might have and so on. I try to where possible, I've tried to participate in organ donor awareness type exercises of different sorts. So I've done that sort of thing. Regarding actually helping women get a bit of a leg up in the world, I'm not sure that I've done as much as I should have. I mean, I haven't gone out to find women to help.
But I'm sure in your team, I mean, with your language consultants and stuff, there's a lot of mentoring and coaching.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So through them, you actually still making a difference, out there. Yes.
No, absolutely. I do believe very strongly in that sort of thing. So, I mean, many of our consultants are female, and I mean, if opportunities come up, I always try to forward them onto them or invite them in to try something out or be part of something, and so on. So I do it in a less formal way. I'll do it like that rather than maybe setting up a program for women.
Yes. All right. No, Rose, we have covered almost everything that I wanted us to chat about. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the viewers that I might not have covered? Maybe it was in the questions or whatever, or just any pearls of wisdom that you want to share with people?
Sure. That's a difficult one. I'd written down some pearls of wisdom. So I just quickly want to see what I'd said because I've gone blank suddenly. Hang on a sec. I'll be with you in a mo. Ooh.
No problems, Rose.
Okay. So, were you interested in any particular pearls for any?
Just anything that's close to your heart, something that you feel passionate about, or something that from your life journey to date, it's something that really was impactful. Anything really, yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
I think one of the things, yeah.
For example, I'm sorry to interject. For example, I mean, there's many times where you were very sick, and the possibility of death was something that was staring in the face. However, through strong will or your spirituality or whatever, you were able to actually see beyond the immediate danger. So there's many things in your journey that you could share with people. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. What I think one of the things I learned, my mother tried to teach me this, but I think one has to experience it for oneself, is that you really have to learn to trust your gut with things, but you have to learn to distinguish between what your gut is telling you and what your fears on the one hand are telling you and your desires or hopes on the other hand are telling you, because they can confuse you. So you've got to learn how to put those two things aside and to listen to what you might say, what your spirit is telling you, or you might say what your instincts are telling you, because you will never be wrong then. For example, if you meet somebody, always remember what your very first impression of them is before you know anything about them, because it will be correct.
Yes.
For instance.
Yes.
So that's something I think people need to learn, but it takes a lot of practice and a lot of focus. Some people seem to be better at it than others, and some of us, I think, like to over intellectualize and over worry things until everything gets blurry and confused. So for me, that's one big thing that was really important. And I think willpower is great, and you can develop your willpower. It's important. You need willpower to be able to do things, but you don't only need willpower. You need other things too. So you need things like, that's why I find your questions about what gets you out of bed in the morning so interesting, because you've got to be, willpower can kind of push you, but you need to be pulled by something as well. You need to be pulled by a love of something, or a need to come back for your family's sake or something like that. I always felt when I was ill that I had to have something, I used to call it something to come back for. So it would be, I knew that, for example, I couldn't leave my mother to bury her child because that would actually kill her. So I knew that I had to come back for her. I knew I had to come back for my friends, for my family, etc. So one would be maybe pulled back by love, and one might be also pushed forward by, that doesn't sound right. You would be pulled by love, but pushed forward by will. So then you start to get the confidence to say, no, I want to try again. No, I don't want to give up on my transplant. I want to try again. I also listened. I mean, it sounds as if I was just being sort of assertive. It wasn't only that. I had to be assertive, and that was scary, but I also had to listen to my body. And I thought, okay, first of all, my body doesn't want another surgery right now. But I also thought, but my kidney, I mean, it feels, at some level, it felt okay. It felt as if it was all right. It didn't feel as if it was unhappy.
So you can't write me off. Exactly. Not as yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. All right, Norman, Rose, I want to thank you for the time you've shared. We've been able to look at your academic journey and the interruptions in between because of health challenges, but also we've been able to show, your journey, how something so serious, you adapted you were still optimistic in spite of all, even articles, scientific articles which had, maybe prognosis that was not looking so good. And I think that's the message that, you know what, don't just give up, give it your best effort, whatever it is, don't just give up. And sometimes, delay some of your I'll say your targets, like you did with your honors. Okay, I'm not going to do it in 1 year. I'll still do it in 2 years, but I understand my body. I understand the challenges I have. I'm still going to get there, but I'll do it slightly differently and I'll get to it. And you got to it. So I think people need to have a bit of grit, focus, hope, very, very, very important, hope, that tomorrow will be better than today,
A belief that it's possible.
It's possible, and enjoy your life. Be present today, enjoy your life today, whilst hoping that tomorrow is going to be better, So when I look at your posts, I see somebody who lives that. You enjoy today, but you also look forward to making a difference into the future. So thank you very much for agreeing to be my guest, during this month that we celebrate women. And may you continue to do good things that fulfill you. Sometimes we do a lot of things, but other things, they are more like a drag. But continue doing things that fulfill you, leave a legacy in the areas of your passion. And we are Facebook friends, so we will continue to interact. But I want to thank you and all the viewers who joined us. It's been a long interview, but sometimes when you want to know a person, you can't just do it within a very short space of time. Now, anybody who watches this interview, even later, but it's going to be available on YouTube, I'll send you the link. Then they can know Rose better than they have known Rose before. And so, but thank you very much, man. I really, really appreciate you.
And thanks so much for having me on this show. It was a great privilege to be here, and you really are doing great work with health literacy, and so much more. And that's one of the reasons I was so excited to be part of this. It was lovely to be able to be here and to share this platform with you for a bit. Thanks for having me. It was really quite a different way of spending Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, now you can go back to PP and his friends now,
They were lurking in the background wanting their food, so unfortunately I'll have to go back to them.
Okay. Lovely, but thank you to all our viewers. I hope you took one or two things from the journey that Dr. Richards has just shared with us. It was really, really a journey that had so many life lessons, but also from an academic point, there was just so many lessons. So thank you until next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.